Good day everyone. In today's presentation we are going to talk about the organizing function of managerial work, its types of authorities and their responsibility, as well as the organizational structure, control, and decision making. First we are going to discuss about line authority. Line authority is the type of authority that reflects superior-subordinate relationships. This is the most fundamental authority in an organization, characterized by power of decision-making. Line authority is the predominant component used in companies with a line organizational structure, where direct lines of authority flow from top management, and the lines of responsibility flow in the opposite direction. Line authority is a top-down approach to management, where the decisions are made by the top management and communicated to the lower-level staff in a hierarchy, a system in which employees are ranked according to relative status. Line managers are assigned to manage teams that operate with the intention of achieving an intended result. Organizations with line authority allow better exertion of unified control. It is a less complicated way of allocating responsibility, since every employee is clear regarding his or her position and clear lines of authority and responsibility is allocated to them. However, since this is a top-down approach, it often results in one-way communication. Decisions are taken by the top management, and complaints and suggestions of lower-level staff may not be communicated back to the top authority. Lower-level staff are closer to the customers. Thus, their experience and suggestions should be incorporated in decision-making. The next type of authority is an authority that is a restricted kind. Functional authority is the right that is delegated to an individual or department to control specified processes, practices, policies, or other matters about activities undertaken by persons in other departments. If the principle of unity of command were followed without exception, authority over these activities would be exercised only by their line superiors. But numerous reasons, including a lack of special knowledge, the lack of ability to supervise processes, and the danger of diverse interpretations of policies, explain why these managers are occasionally not allowed to exercise this authority. In such cases, line managers are deprived of some authority. It is delegated by their common superior to a staff specialist or a manager in another department. For example, a company controller is ordinarily given functional authority to prescribe the system of accounting throughout the company, but this specialized authority is a delegation from the chief executive. Functional authority is not restricted to managers of a particular type of department. It may be exercised by line, service, or staff department heads, but more often by the latter two, because service and staff departments are usually composed of specialists whose knowledge becomes the basis for functional controls. One can better understand functional authority by thinking of it as a small slice of the authority of a line superior. A corporation president, for example, has completed authority to manage a corporation, subject only to limitations placed by such superior authority as the board of directors, the corporate charter and bylaws, and government regulation. In the pure staff situation, the advisors on personnel, accounting, purchasing, or public relations have no part in this line authority, their duty being mere to offer counsel. But when the president delegates to these advisors the right to issue instructions directly to the line organizations, as shown in the figure, that right is called functional authority. The four staff and service executives have functional authority over the line organizations concerning procedures in the field of accounting, personnel, purchasing, and public relations. What has happened is that the president, feeling it unnecessary to clear such specialized matters personally, has delegated line authority to staff assistants or managers to issue their instructions to the operating departments. The functional authority should be carefully restricted to limited functions. For example, the functional authority of the personnel manager of the general line organization is ordinarily limited to prescribing procedures for the recruiting and selecting of employees, but does not include telling departments which candidates are to be selected. Likewise, a purchasing manager's functional authority is limited to setting the procedures for departmental purchasing and does not include instructing departments what they can purchase or when. Moving on to the next. Staff authority. Staff authority refers to the right to advise on improving the effectiveness for line employees in performing their duties. Staff personnel are generally independent employees who do not report to line managers, and they can be external staff who are temporarily employed to perform a particular task. These are highly specialized individuals, thus are employed for their expert knowledge and the ability to add value to the company. Staff personnel may not be employed by all types of organizations. Since they are highly specialized, the cost of recruiting them is higher. Thus, they may not be affordable for small organizations. However, the larger the organization, the greater the need and ability to employ staff personnel since there is a need for expertise in diversified areas. Thus, the size of the organization is a significant factor in determining whether staff personnel should be employed. Staff personnel may work part-time for the organization, providing their expertise. Some of them may even provide the organization with an advisory role rather than engaging in business operations. Staff managers complement the work of line managers since line managers can focus more time on routine activities and related decision-making when specialized work is carried out by staff personnel. However, staff authority is not granted the power to take decisions that will affect the company as a whole, only for the specific area that they are responsible for. It is vital that both line and staff personnel work closely in collaboration to ensure efficiency of operations. However, in practice, conflicts between line and staff personnel can be seen due to sometimes overlapping duties, which in turn reduces the effectiveness of both. The last topic of this presentation is about organizational structure and control decision-making. An organizational structure is a system that outlines how certain activities are directed in order to achieve the goals of an organization. These activities can include rules, roles, and responsibilities. The organizational structure also determines how information flows between levels within the company. For example, in a centralized structure, decisions flow from the top down, while in a decentralized structure, decision-making power is distributed among various levels of the organization. Having an organizational structure in place allows companies to remain efficient and focused. Key takeaways. An organizational structure outlines how certain activities are directed to achieve the goals of an organization. Successful organizational structures define each employee's job and how it fits within the overall system. A centralized structure has a defined chain of command, while decentralized structures give almost every employee receiving a high level of personal agency. Types of organizational structures include functional, divisional, flat-archy, and matrix structures. Senior leaders should consider a variety of factors before deciding which type of organization is best for their business, including the business goals, industry, and culture of the company. Understanding an organizational structure. Businesses of all shapes and sizes use organizational structures heavily. They define a specific hierarchy within an organization. A successful organizational structure defines each employee's job and how it fits within the overall system. Put simply, the organizational structure lays out who does what so the company can meet its objectives. This structuring provides the company with a visual representation of how it is shaped and how it can best move forward in achieving its goals. Organizational structures are normally illustrated in some sort of chart or diagram like a pyramid, where the most powerful members of the organization sit at the top, while those with the least amount of power are at the bottom. Not having a formal structure in place may prove difficult for certain organizations. For instance, employees may have difficulty knowing to whom they should report. That can lead to uncertainty as to who is responsible for what in the organization. Having a structure in place can help with efficiency and provide clarity for everyone at every level. That also means each and every department can be more productive, as they are likely to be more focused on energy and time. Centralized and decentralized organizational structures. An organizational structure is either centralized or decentralized. Traditionally, organizations have been structured with centralized leadership and a defined chain of command. The military is an organization famous for its highly centralized structure, with a long and specific hierarchy of superiors and subordinates. In a centralized organizational system, there are very clear responsibilities for each role, with subordinate roles defaulting to the guidance of their superiors. There has been a rise in decentralized organizations, as is the case with many technology startups. This allows companies to remain fast, agile, and adaptable, with almost every employee receiving a high level of personal agency. For example, Johnson & Johnson is a company that's known for its decentralized structure. 2 is a large company with over 200 business units and brands that function in sometimes very different industries, each operates autonomously. Even in decentralized companies, there are still usually built-in hierarchies, such as the chief operating officer operating at a higher level than an entry-level associate. However, teams are empowered to make their own decisions and come to the best conclusion without necessarily getting approval from up top. There are 4 types of organizational structure. Let's tackle the first one. Functional structure. 4 types of common organizational structures are implemented in the real world. The first and most common is a functional structure. This is also referred to as a bureaucratic organizational structure and breaks up a company based on the specialization of its workforce. Most small to medium-sized businesses implement a functional structure, dividing the firm into departments consisting of marketing, sales, and operations is the act of using a bureaucratic organizational structure. Divisional or multi-divisional structure. The second type is common among large companies with many business units. Called the divisional or multi-divisional structure, a company that uses this method structures its leadership team based on the products, projects, or subsidiaries they operate. A good example of this structure is Johnson & Johnson. With thousands of products and lines of business, the company structures itself so each business unit operates as its own company with its own president. Flat-RG structure. Flat-RG, a newer structure, is the third type and is used among many startups. As the name alludes, it flattens the hierarchy and chain of command and gives its employees a lot of autonomy. Companies that use this type of structure have a high speed of implementation. Matrix structure. The fourth and final organizational structure is a matrix structure. It is also the most confusing and the least used. This structure matrixes employees across different superiors, divisions, or departments. An employee working for a matrix company, for example, may have duties in both sales and customer service. Benefits of organizational structures. Putting an organizational structure in place can be very beneficial to a company. The structure not only defines a company's hierarchy but also allows the firm to lay out the pay structure for its employees. By putting the organizational structure in place, the firm can decide salary grades and ranges for each position. The structure also makes operations more efficient and much more effective. By separating employees and functions into different departments, the company can perform different operations at once seamlessly. Next is about organizations, decision-making. Organizational decision-making is a precise decision-making of an intellectual entity composed with autonomous elements. Decisions-making in organization occurs at all levels. In all organizations, managers make decisions using both rational and intuitive processes, but organization-level decisions are not usually made by a single manager. Many organizational decisions involve several managers. Problem identification and problem solution involve many departments, multiple viewpoints, and even other organizations, which are beyond the scope of an individual manager. by broadening the search for solutions and avoid becoming defensive gives better decisions result. There are various organizational decision-making models. The first one is the rational model. The rational model proposes that managers use a rational, four-stage sequence when making decisions. According to this model, managers are completely objective and possess complete information to make a decision. Despite criticism for being unrealistic, the rational model is instructive because it analytically breaks down the decision-making process and serves as a conceptual anchor for newer models. There are four stages of decision-making in rational model. First, identify the problem or opportunity. Second, generate alternative solutions. Third, evaluate alternatives and select solution. And lastly, implement and evaluate the solution chosen. The next one is garbage can model. It is current descriptions of organizational decision processes. It is not directly comparable to the earlier models, because the garbage can model associated with a pattern or flow of multiple decisions within organizations, whereas the incremental and Carnegie models focus on how a single decision is made. The garbage can model helps managers to think of the whole organization and the frequent decisions being made by managers throughout. The garbage can model was developed to describe the pattern of decision-making in organizations that experience extremely high uncertainty. Michael Cohen, James March, and Johan Olsen, the originators of the model, call the highly ambiguous conditions an organized anarchy, which is an extremely organic organization. Organized anarchies do not rely on the normal vertical hierarchy of authority and bureaucratic decision rules. They are caused by three characteristics. First is by problematic preferences, goals, problems, alternatives, and solutions are ill-defined. Ambiguity characterizes each step of a decision process. Second, unclear, poorly understood technology. Cause and effect relationships within the organization are difficult to identify. An explicit database that applies to decisions is not available. And third is turnover. Organizational positions experience turnover of participants. In addition, employees are busy and have only limited time to allocate to any one problem or decision. Participation in any given decision will be fluid and limited. The last model is political model. Political model, in contrast to the rational model, companies in the political model, often known as instrumentalists, do not focus on a single issue but on many intra-organizational problems that reproduce their individual goals. The political model does not undertake that decisions result from applying existing standard operating procedures, programs, and routines. Decisions result from bargaining among coalitions. In this model, power is decentralized. This notion of decision-making as a political process highlights the natural multiplicity of goals, values, and interests in a complex environment. The incremental approach of the political model permits managers to lessen the time spent on the information search and problem definition stages. Incremental decision-making is geared to address shortcomings in present policy rather than consider a superior, but novel, course of action. In the political model, the stakeholders have different perception, priorities, and solutions. Because stakeholders have the power to reject some proposals, no policy that harms a powerful stakeholder is likely to triumph even if it is objectively optimal. The decision-making process involves the following steps. Define the problem. Identify limiting factors. Develop potential alternatives. Analyze the alternatives. Select the best alternative. Implement the decision. Establish a control and evaluation system. From a cognitive perspective, the decision-making process must be regarded as a continuous process integrated in the interaction with the environment. From a normative perspective, the analysis of individual decisions is concerned with the logic of decision-making and rationality. In conclusion, organizational structures and control are made to distribute the decisions of executive management down through administrative levels where the managers interpret those decisions and put them into practice.